Previously, after waking up as Elsie, the twin sister of Alyssa in the novel she was reading, she went to meet Asef, the villain of the story. To prevent Asef from experiencing the tragedy, she tried various ways to ensure Asef wouldn't go through it. However, after meeting Asef several times, she began to develop feelings for him. In this episode, seeing Elsie's arrival made Asef so happy. He quickly came to pick her up as soon as she got off the carriage. Seeing Asef so delighted with her arrival made her incredibly happy. Asef then asked if something had happened, seeing her coming early in the morning. Realizing that she had come without Asef's knowledge, Elsie apologized for arriving so early. She explained that she wanted to return his coat and also tell him something urgent. Asef said that it wasn't a problem at all. In fact, her arrival made him very happy. He then invited Elsie inside while instructing his butler to go home immediately. Upon hearing that, the butler tried to refuse his order and informed him that he was assigned to escort Elsie. She noticed the tense atmosphere and directed her butler to leave without her first. The butler nodded and left them. On their way into the manor, Asef noticed that Elsie was holding his coat. He realized that Elsie had come to return it. So he came up with an idea to make her stay with him a little longer. He praised Elsie, saying that the bright dress suited her so well and she looked beautiful. Then he asked her if she was hungry. However, she said no because she had already had breakfast before coming there. Upon hearing that, Asef invited her to go horse riding together until lunchtime. After all, his main purpose that morning was to go horse riding. But Elsie wanted to decline because she wasn't wearing the appropriate attire for horse riding. Asef assured her that she didn't need to worry about that because he would make her ride sideways. Elsie then mentioned that her actual purpose of meeting Asef was to return his coat. And since the coat she had yesterday was being cleaned, she would call her butler to deliver it later. Upon hearing that, Asef furrowed his brow and fell silent for a moment. He then told Elsie to wait for him for a moment and entered the house to put away his coat. Once inside his room, he angrily threw the coat onto the bed. He was furious because he knew that Elsie's purpose of meeting him was to inform him that she couldn't accompany him to the courthouse later. He reached for a bottle on the table. The bottle contained poison, and he was determined to use it. Meanwhile, Elsie, who was outside, was determined to tell Asef that she couldn't attend the courthouse with him. Although it was difficult for her to make that decision, she had to do it because she knew she wasn't destined to be Asef's partner. The two of them were horse riding and passing through a beautiful forest. Elsie mentioned that she didn't expect such a beautiful forest to be there. At that moment, Elsie tried to say her main purpose of meeting him, but before she could, Asef cut her off. Asef said that the fresh air was pleasant, so he wanted to ride the horse a little faster. Realizing that Asef was taking her deep into the forest, she started to worry. But Asef told her that he liked the situation because no one could disturb them. He rode the horse even faster while secretly taking out the bottle of poison he had brought, without Elsie noticing. Elsie, who unaware of what is about to happen, said, "Perhaps it's because of the many flowers we passed by, the air smells sweet and the atmosphere feels." But before she could finish her sentence, Asef stabbed the horse with a poisoned dagger. The horse, affected by the poison, leaped in pain, causing both of them to lose control and fall off the horse. However, before they hit the ground, Asef caught Elsie and shielded her with his body. She woke up and saw Asef lying in pain. Asef tried to get up but felt a sharp pain in his left shoulder. Seeing Asef's condition, she started to worry and tremble, apologizing for her clumsiness. Asef said it wasn't her fault, looking at the horse trembling in pain. Asef explained that it was because of the poison. He mentioned that someone who held a grudge against him might have come to kill him. Elsie wanted to know who did it, but Asef replied that he was unsure too, as there were many people who despised him. He also expressed his concern that this incident might make Elsie afraid to meet him in the future. She reassured him that she didn't need to worry about that. For now, she was more concerned about Asef's well-being. Seeing Asef in pain, she ran towards the horse and retrieved a bag containing medicine and bandages. Asef felt relieved, saying that it was probably prepared by Almor. However, he couldn't do it himself due to his injured shoulder. So he called Elsie to help him. She asked what she should do, and Asef asked her to remove his clothes. Shyly, Elsie started taking off Asef's clothes one by one. However, her sense of embarrassment quickly turned into a nightmare when she saw Asef's body covered in scars. Seeing Elsie trembling and on the verge of tears at the sight of the scars, Asef reassured her that they were nothing. He explained that the scars were inflicted by his mother, who had tried to discipline him. Because he felt that the scars looked ugly, he told her not to look at them. But Elsie was shocked to see Asef's body in such a state, couldn't control her emotions. She knew how Asef got those scars because she had read about it in a novel, but seeing them in person was truly shocking. Seeing Elsie crying and embracing him, Asef couldn't believe that seeing his body's injuries made her so emotional. Initially, he just wanted Elsie to feel a bit guilty because she tried pushing him away. With that incident, he thought Elsie would feel sympathy towards him, but he didn't expect her to be so emotional. Asef tried to calm her who hadn't stopped crying since earlier. Elsie trembling in pain and fell to the ground. She couldn't control her emotions, and in her mind, all she wanted was for Asef's body wounds to disappear forever. Unexpectedly, a miracle happened. Suddenly, the seal on her left chest started to glow. Asef looked at the light, confused, and suddenly the bright light entered his left chest. A miracle occurred, and all the wounds in his body disappeared instantly. Witnessing this miracle, he called out to Elsie and asked if she did it using holy power. However, at that moment, Elsie was in so much pain. She felt like her left chest was being stabbed repeatedly. Due to the overwhelming pain, she couldn't bear it and fell unconscious. After taking her to his manor, Asef called for a doctor and a priest. However, the priest mentioned that he couldn't find any trace of Elsie using holy power. Then, he wondered why Elsie hadn't woken up yet. The doctor said, after checking her pulse, he was uncertain about the cause. But seeing her cold hands and feet and holy power has no effect. He worried that Elsie might have internal injuries. Asef thought it might be because of their fall from the horse. Then the doctor mentioned that even though Asef managed to protect her, the shock from the fall must have been quite severe. He wanted to check Elsie's stomach just in case, but upon hearing that, Asef looked at him angrily and called Almor to take them away and find a female doctor instead. While looking at Elsie still unconscious and seeing her dirty clothes, he remembered the doctor's words. The doctor had advised him to remove her outer clothes so she could breathe comfortably. Thinking the doctor would take a while to arrive, he mustered the courage to remove her outer garments. After successfully removing the outer garment, he took a relieved breath for managing to control himself. Suddenly, he was startled by the arrival of Almor, who came along with a doctor. Realizing Almor's sudden arrival without knocking the door made him extremely angry. However, Almor stated that he did it because he didn't want to wake Elsie up. Asef, not pleased with Almor's presence, warned him not to do it again. Shortly after, Elsie woke up from her sleep. Realizing this, Asef quickly approached her and asked about her condition. Seeing Asef coming, she tried to get up and asked what was happening. Worried about her health, Asef called the doctor to examine her, while being treated by the doctor. She assured Asef that she was fine and then asked about his condition. However, Asef signaled her to be quiet and asked the doctor about Elsie's condition, whether she had any internal injuries or any illness. The doctor said that she didn't have any serious injuries. But Asef, who saw Elsie faint, was not fully convinced by the doctor's answer. Then the doctor informed him that she was currently weak, possibly due to excessive stress, and her heartbeat was irregular, maybe caused by the sudden shock. Before the doctor left, she told Asef that she would send medication later and left. Seeing the doctor leave, Elsie said she didn't feel any pain and asked Asef what was happening. Asef apologized and said that the incident happened because of him. However, Elsie was still concerned about his condition and asked about his shoulder. For unknown reasons, she didn't remember that she had already healed Asef. Seizing the opportunity, Asef took advantage of his pain. He pretended to be in pain to make Elsie worry more about him. With this situation, he hoped that Elsie would sympathize with him after his condition, and change her mind about accompanying him to Cordes later. Elsie called him to sit next to her and gave Asef the option to either massage her shoulder or call the doctor again. Asef replied that he wanted to sit with her. Asef then asked if Elsie would leave him when he was still in pain. Elsie replied that she would stay until Asef felt comfortable. Hearing that, he was very happy and invited her to stay until dinner and come back the next day. He said this while resting his head on Elsie's shoulder. Suddenly, they heard someone knocking on the door. Asef opened the door and saw Almur outside. He wanted to chase Almur away, but suddenly Alyssa appeared from behind. Seeing Alyssa's arrival, Asef lost his mood. He told Alyssa that barging in without the owner of the house permission was very rude. Asef let her know. Alyssa replied that she didn't enter without permission. She came in through the front door, which was opened by his butler. As a guest, Alyssa told Asef that she should be treated well. However, Asef replied that Elsie needed rest. If she truly cared about her sister, she should step aside. Hearing that, Alyssa became furious. She tried to enter the room but was blocked by Asef, who obstructed her with his leg and causing her to fall. Asef smiled at her and tried to help her up. Alyssa tried to control her anger because she was in front of Elsie. Elsie saw Alyssa and asked how she knew she was there. But upon seeing Elsie only dressed lightly, Alyssa quickly grabbed a cloth and wrapped it around her. She asked why Elsie was dressed like that and why her finger was also injured. Elsie, who just realized that she was only dressed like that, started to worry, afraid that Asef might already see her seal. Meanwhile, Alyssa and Asef continued to argue. Seeing Elsie dressed like that, Alyssa scolded Asef. However, Asef responded by saying that he had just called his maid. The maid would help Elsie take a bath. Hearing that, Alyssa became even angrier. She told Asef that he should have sent a message to her family if something happened to Elsie. Seeing the day getting late and Elsie still not returning home made them very worried. Asef explained that he was distracted with calling the doctor and tending to Elsie. Besides, Elsie had just woken up from her sleep. He told Alyssa that she should understand the situation and not charge in there like an angry bull. He said that while seeking confirmation from Elsie. Elsie, sitting on the bed, said that it was true, so she wanted them to stop fighting. However, they ignored her and continued arguing. This made her very angry, and in her anger, she screamed at them to stop fighting. Seeing Elsie so angry, they both fell silent, and Asef apologized. Elsie called out to Alyssa to apologize, but Alyssa refused to do so. She screamed, calling Asef shameless, impudent, and a pervert, then ran out of the room. Elsie chased after her, telling her that Asef was injured because of her. She promised to return home that day, so she wanted Alyssa to apologize. Since Elsie had made a promise, Alyssa reluctantly apologized and left them. Asef saw Elsie staring out the window. Although they were together at that moment, Asef couldn't understand why he felt so anxious and uneasy and feeling hopeless in front of her. Seeing Asef turning pale, Elsie walked towards him. Before she reached him, Asef quickly reached out and hugged her. He said that he couldn't explain his feelings at that moment. He told Elsie that he was worried about losing her to anyone else. He wanted Elsie to promise not to leave him and to stay with him forever. Upon hearing this, Elsie couldn't say anything. She knew that even though he appeared strong and calm on the outside, he was unstable and sad on the inside. Despite knowing this, she was determined not to go with him to Cordes. However, before she could say it, Asef screamed and said that he wanted Elsie to come with him to Cordes. Asef couldn't control his emotions. He pleaded for Elsie to come with him. Elsie remained silent, just looking at the emotional Asef. She didn't know what to do in that moment. Inside the bathroom, Elsie was still confused about what she should do. She came there to turn him down, both his heart and his offer to be his Cordes partner. Seeing Asef's reaction earlier, she believed that his feelings were genuine. Suddenly, she realized that the color of her seal was fading. She thought that maybe the seal had come to her by mistake, so she tried to scratch it off, hoping that the seal would come off. Meanwhile, Asef and Almur were discussing their plans from earlier that day. He told Almur that their plans didn't need to continue and asked him to leave and prepare dinner. Almur, confused by Asef's decision, reluctantly accepted it. But as he was about to leave, Asef called him back and told Almur to continue their plans. Almur looked at Asef with confusion, not understanding what Asef was thinking. Realizing that Almur was still there, he angrily told him to leave immediately. Not long after that, Asef and Elsie were sitting down for dinner. She looked at him while thinking whether Asef truly liked her or not. She thought maybe because of that, the power of the seal was weakening, and if they grew closer to each other, maybe their fate would change and the seal of God would disappear completely. With that in mind, she thought that loving Asef wouldn't be a problem anymore. Asef realizes Elsie's gaze and asks if she wanted to say something to him. After thinking about it several times, Elsie finally decided to go with him to the courtesse ceremony. She looked at Asef, then Elsie replied and said that she would be his partner for courtesse. Elsie made the decision to become Asef's partner for courtesse in the future. She didn't want to leave Asef alone again. Upon hearing that, he didn't expect Elsie to agree with him. However, Elsie told Asef that they had to take one step at a time. Whatever they would do in the future, they had to do it slowly. Asef agreed with what Elsie said. He thanked her for agreeing with him. That response made him so happy, but at the same time, he also felt anxious. He was anxious that he might be the only one feeling happy. Hearing this, Elsie tried to assure him that she was also happy with the decision. Asef, who finally got what he wanted, smiled and thought to himself, even though Elsie wanted them to take one step at a time. Sooner or later, it didn't change the fact that she belonged to him now. Elsie's decision made him very so happy. He told her that he had a gift for her, and he wanted to show her after dinner. After finishing their meal, he took Elsie somewhere. Hearing that Asef wanted to give her a gift, she felt uneasy because she couldn't give Asef a gift. Asef told her not to worry about it, but if she really wanted to give him a gift, it was okay to give it in the future. Elsie agreed and promised to give him a gift in the future. Upon reaching their destination, Elsie was amazed by what she saw. In front of her, she saw a beautiful horse. Asef said it was a rare breed of horse called an Ahaltik from the Sestian Empire. He asked Elsie if she liked the horse or not. Elsie answered that she liked it very much. Then Asef called her to come closer. Elsie approached the horse and tried to pet it. She told Asef that she was really bad at riding and was worried if she could ride such a beautiful horse. Asef replied that she didn't need to worry because he would teach her if she wanted. However, he couldn't finish his sentence as he remembered the incident that morning. Once again, he apologized to Elsie for that incident. Elsie just smiled at him. Since the horse didn't have a name yet, Asef wanted Elsie to give it a name. The horse was named Sef. Hearing that, Asef teased Elsie, asking if it was because she wanted to think of Asef every time she saw the horse. Elsie shyly replied that she didn't mean it like that. Seeing that the day was getting darker, Asef took Elsie and escorted her home. After arriving at Elsie's place, once again, Asef thanked her for agreeing to come with him. Although at that moment, he still felt anxious, afraid that she might leave him at any moment. But he promised to take things slowly and try not to get ahead of himself. Asef stroked Elsie's hair and said, "So for now, let me do this, Zay. I think my heart will explode if I don't." After saying that, Asef leaned in and kissed her forehead. Asef smiled as he looked at the shy Elsie. She wanted to say something to him, but Asef stopped her and said that he only wanted to see her smile and didn't want to hear anything else at that moment. However, Elsie wanted to tell him everything she was feeling. Day by day, her feelings of love for Asef grew stronger, and she wanted to stay with him forever. Despite having a seal that determined their fated partners, the seal was fading, and she hoped it would disappear completely, but before she could speak, they were startled by her father's voice calling her from behind. Seeing Duke Tiada, Asef bowed and greeted him. Her father approached them, looked at Asef, and asked he was told that Asef was on vacation. Not expecting him to be with his daughter at that late hour, Asef responded by saying that Elsie told him she was bad at riding, so he was teaching her how to ride a horse. Duke Tiada said it was impossible for his daughter not to know how to ride because she had been learning to ride since she was a child. He looked at Elsie, knowing that she had strong feelings for Asef, so he didn't want to prolong the situation. He thanked Asef for safely bringing his daughter home and wanted to repay his kindness. However, due to the late hour, he promised to invite him to his house another time. Asef understood and also apologized for bringing Elsie home so late, hoping that Duke Tiada wouldn't be too hard on her. Hearing that, Duke Tiada smiled and replied, "Of course not." He then called for Elsie to accompany him into the house. Upon hearing that, Elsie hurriedly followed her father, thanking Asef for giving her a ride home. Watching them leave, Asef realized that he couldn't deny it any longer. Elsie was the only one who allowed him to breathe in that dirty and disgusting world. He wanted to be filled with the affection dripping from her eyes. As he walked away, he promised himself that he would be the only one who could be with Elsie and no one else. Meanwhile, Duke Tiada and Elsie looked at the horse given by Asef. Duke Tiada remarked that it was a very rare horse. Then he noticed Elsie's finger wrapped in a bandage and asked how she got the injury. Elsie replied that it was because of her. She accidentally cut her finger while hiding it from him, not wanting her father to see the wound. Seeing Elsie like that, Duke Tiada fell silent for a moment. Then he told Elsie that he also had a gift for her and took out a necklace from his pocket. He said it was a necklace made with a holy stone, which changes color to match her seal when she meets her fated lover. He suggested that Elsie should stop seeing Asef and told her to find her real fated partner before getting any closer to him. Hearing that, Elsie fell silent immediately. She wanted to say something to her father, but before she could speak, he continued. He didn't want Elsie to think he was being too harsh. He knew that Asef was a strong and capable man, and the Duke didn't think he would be an unsuitable partner for her. However, he was worried that Asef would be the one to get hurt in the end. So he suggested that Elsie stop seeing him for his sake. Then Elsie asked her father if he had ever heard of someone's seal disappearing. Her father replied that it was impossible for that to happen because the seal is absolute. Elsie wanted to tell her father that her seal was fading, but she held back. She didn't want to worry her father even more. And she was afraid that word might spread to Asef. Her father spoke again, saying that if it was just a fling, he was going to wait. But if Elsie continued to meet with Asef, it could endanger her. The seal sickness would soon come, and he didn't want to see her in pain. He told her that many people would gather in the capital when the courtship starts in 2 days. So he wanted Elsie to find her fated partner at that time. If she still couldn't find him on that day, then he would tell the world about her seal, even if she didn't want him to. Upon hearing that, Elsie screamed and told her father that she was fine. She started crying and told her father that the seal's sickness is different for everyone. How could he believe that a person's heart can only be decided by the seal? She thought that was too cruel. She told her father that she loved Asef very much, and her feelings were real. She wanted her father to give her a bit more time. Seeing Elsie crying, Duke Tiada regretted making his daughter sad. He stopped talking about the matter and then took Elsie inside the house. Meanwhile, inside her room, Elsie was thinking. She wasn't sure if the decision she made was right. In the novel she read, there was no character named Elsie Tiada. She was also worried that one day Asef would find out the true events surrounding her parents' death. As she was pondering, she suddenly heard someone knocking on the door. She knew it was Saya and called her in. Saya entered and asked if Elsie had changed her clothes. Seeing Elsie wearing an outfit she had never seen before, she asked where she got it from. Elsie shyly answered that due to an incident earlier that morning, Asef had given her the clothes. Saya informed her that there would be a new maid coming the next day because the previous maid had to quit suddenly. Upon hearing that, Elsie felt regretful for not being able to bid her farewell. After Saya is done taking off her outer garment, Elsie told her to go and rest as it was already late at night. Meanwhile, Asef, who was sleeping, woke up due to a nightmare. That night, he dreamt of Elsie saying that she didn't love him. 2 days later, the day for Asef and Elsie to attend the courtship ceremony had finally arrived. However, due to being unable to forget his nightmare from the previous night, his mood was extremely bad that morning. One of the maids who was helping him accidentally pinned his sleeve button and pricked his hand. Asef was shocked and pulled his hand away while screaming at her in anger. Seeing Asef so angry made her frightened, and she trembled as she apologized to him. Almor, who witnessed the incident, tried to save the maid. He informed Asef that she was new and not skilled at her job yet, and he promised to teach her as soon as possible. Almor called a nearby maid and instructed her to take the young maid away. Almor looked at Asef with astonishment, puzzled by his fluctuating mood. A few days ago, he saw Asef so happy, but today he seemed as if he wanted to kill someone. He was surprised to hear Asef calling him. Asef asked her the gift he had prepared for Elsie was. Almor lifted a box and informed him that he had already wrapped it up. He also told Asef that he had sent a maid to work at Tia the house as instructed. However, Asef appeared to be even angrier. He didn't see all the gifts there. Almor told him that he was currently looking for the item. Hearing that made Asef even more furious, and he unsheathed a sword that was nearby, pointing it at Almor's throat. Asef warned him to prepare the gift, or else his life would be at stake. Shortly after, Asef arrived at Elsie's manor. He came to pick her up. A butler approached him, informing him that Elsie would be out shortly. He explained that Elsie apologized for being slightly late in getting ready. Asef replied that it was okay. Suddenly, he caught a whiff of perfume from behind that reminded him of his stepmother. The scent made him extremely uncomfortable. He turned around and saw a woman in a red dress. The woman introduced herself as Seja Tarasai, the second daughter of the Tarasai household. Seja approached Asef and held his hand, telling him that they had met at the tea party hosted by Ethia before. Unable to stand the perfume, Asef pulled his hand away and bluntly asked what she wanted. Seja didn't expect such a response and replied that she only wanted to ask how he was doing. Feeling disgusted by Seja's touch, Asef turned away and put on his gloves. Asef, unable to tolerate the perfume any longer, tried to leave. Seja, who still wanted to chat with Asef, called out to him. However, hearing Seja casually calling his name made Asef even angrier. He asked her if she was looking down on him. Seeing Asef so angry, she quickly apologized and explained that she only wanted to be friendly, and she didn't mean to be rude. She mentioned that during their first meeting, he was very kind to her. She asked why he was so angry, wondering if it was because of Miss Tia the two. She told him that Elsie had been rude to her, as Elsie had sent her a letter but she didn't show up to meet her, and now Elsie was making Asef wait outside. Hearing that made Asef even angrier. He approached Seja and called her a pathetic wench. He told Seja that Elsie had sent her several letters to cancel their meeting, but she never responded. And now she was playing the victim. Asef told her to leave before she caused an even bigger scene. Asef gave her a warning by pressing his hand on her shoulder, telling her that if no one saw them at that moment, he would have snapped her neck. Seja, terrified, couldn't say anything and could only hold back her tears. Asef also told her to watch her mouth from now on if she still valued her life. Asef released his grip on Seja's shoulder. Shortly after, Elsie called out to him from behind. Seeing Elsie running towards him, Asef was overjoyed at her arrival. Seeing Elsie's arrival, Asef is filled with joy and praises her, saying she looks as beautiful as ever. Elsie looks at Seja, who is pale. She approaches her and asks if she's feeling sick. Trembling in fear as Asef gazes at her, Seja answers that she is fine. Asef goes to Seja and asks if she is truly okay. He assures her that he will call for his maid if she needs any assistance. Fearful of Asef, Seja rejects the offer and runs away, leaving them behind. As Seja departs, Asef invites Elsie to board his carriage. While following Asef from behind, she called Saya to follow them with the carriage from behind. Asef, who finally alone with Elsie, appears extremely happy. He rests his head on her shoulder and tells her that he had nightmares during the past 2 days when he hadn't seen her. Feeling tired and worn out, Elsie asks if he is okay, as he has to participate in the match at the Cordes ceremony later. She suggests that Asef should get some sleep before they arrive. She also asks about Asef's shoulder. Asef replies that his shoulder has healed but he needs some purification to cheer him up. Hearing this, Elsie asks how she can help. Asef looks at her, takes off his glove, and touches Elsie's face. Startled by Asef's actions, Elsie steps back and tells him to stop fooling around. Asef responds that he is not fooling around but seducing her. Realizing that Asef is getting too close to her face, she tries to avoid him and tells him not to do it. Seeing Elsie trying to evade him, he holds her chin and tells her not to avoid him. He presses Elsie against the wall and expresses his desire to touch her lips. Asef leans closer, asking if he can do it or not. Elsie lowers her head and tells Asef that she is still a little scared and afraid. Recognizing that Elsie is not ready to deepen their relationship, Asef withdraws. He tells her that he doesn't want to do something she dislikes. However, he manages to kiss Elsie's cheek and embraces her. He sighs with relief and tells Elsie that he feels so much better now. This story ends here, but this is not the end. If you want the next episode, please leave a comment below.